We are officially less than 2 days away from the launch of Tears of the Kingdom, and I cannot wait. And this is set to not only be one of the biggest games of 2023, but also probably one of the biggest games on the Switch of all time. Tears of the Kingdom is a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild. And I think by now it's pretty well established that this is definitely more than just a Breath of the Wild DLC. And the thing I'm personally the most excited about is to get to see a Hyrule that's being restored to its former glory. And I can't wait to see the land hopefully brimming with a bit more life than Breath of the Wild had. But before you buy the game, there is a few things you're going to want to take into consideration. So today we're going to go over absolutely everything you need to know before you play Tears of the Kingdom. And in this video, I'm going to cover a few things you might want to get ready before the release date even comes. This video is also going to be completely spoiler-free. Everything I talk about is either in the trailers themselves, on Nintendo's website, or something that one of the official Nintendo accounts has tweeted. So Nintendo, don't copyright me, okay? Please, thank you. All right, let's start off with the release date. Tears of the Kingdom will be coming out May 12th at midnight at whatever region your Nintendo account is set as. So no, you can't just change your time zone on your Switch to the Australian time zone and get it early. One thing to bear in mind though, if you're American, it comes out at 12 AM Eastern. So if you live in Pacific time, you can actually just set your Switch to Eastern and get the game early that way. Now, if you have the game digitally, you're already able to pre-install the entire game, so you just have to click play at midnight. For those of you who are like me and bought the game physically though, we just have to wait until the postman arrives, and fingers crossed, it's early in the day. One thing to bear in mind if you are buying the game physically, that there is a day one patch for the game. This just means that you'll need an internet connection when you load the game up in order to get the update, and then you're good to go. Now, Tears of the Kingdom is actually incredibly unique. It's really not that often that Nintendo do a direct sequel to a previous Zelda game, so that kind of puts us in this unique place. Normally with Zelda games, they are all connected through a timeline, but they normally work also as a standalone story. But this isn't really the case with Tears of the Kingdom, as it's a direct sequel of Breath of the Wild. And we've already seen that many of the characters from Breath of the Wild will be returning to this game. So the real question is, do you need to have played Breath of the Wild in order to play Tears of the Kingdom? The answer is no, not really, but you do need to do your homework. All you really need to do is to get up to speed with the story from Breath of the Wild, so you know what's happening in Tears of the Kingdom. Now, this might mean you miss out on a few of the finer details, like a few characters from side quests or whatever that come back in Tears of the Kingdom, but for the most part, this will get you where you need to be to understand everything happening in Tears of the Kingdom. In the description box down below, I'll link a few videos. We have one from Nintendo themselves that's only about 6 minutes and basically just has all the cutscenes from Breath of the Wild, or a few extras that are a lot longer but explain the lore in a lot more depth. There will be a few other things that will probably carry over from Breath of the Wild, like the controls, for example. They're probably going to be exactly the same. But in terms of the puzzles, I really don't think they're going to be that similar. We've already been given information about the new powers which you're getting in Tears of the Kingdom, as it looks as though there's no Sheikah Slate or any of the abilities you were able to use in Breath of the Wild. We've already seen that you can use an ability called Recall to turn back time. We've also seen a phase ability that allows you to pass through ceiling structures, which hopefully means we're going to spend less time climbing in this game. And we've also seen this Fuse and Ultra Hand abilities, which allow you to combine items together. Like, you can turn an eyeball and an arrow into a homing arrow, or you can also make motorized vehicles. One thing to note, much like Breath of the Wild, I probably don't expect there to be difficulty settings for Tears of the Kingdom. But I do think with the addition of this kind of crafting mechanic, there will be ways to make battles a lot easier. Like, for example, with the ability to make homing arrows, all of a sudden you don't have to worry if your aim is absolutely terrible. So I do genuinely think that everyone will be able to play this, as you can tailor the experience to whatever you feel like. Now, compared to Breath of the Wild, there are a few changes that have been made. First of all, not only will you be able to explore the entire land of Hyrule, there's also the entire sky to experience as well. And I feel like this game is looking to be a lot more sandboxy of an experience than Breath of the Wild was. Although Breath of the Wild did have quite a lot of ways to solve different puzzles, but I feel like with this addition of these build mechanics, That almost makes it so that there's infinite solutions for every problem there is in the game. We've also got a few quality of life features that have already been brought up. Like, for example, you can cook anywhere now, as you can basically build yourself a stove. There's also a recipe book, so it makes it easier when you're cooking to get exactly the effects you're looking for. And there's also a gacha machine, which I know I'm going to spend far too much time on. And then we have maybe the biggest difference from Breath of the Wild that might tempt a few of you back. Today, Nintendo tweeted to confirm that Tears of the Kingdom will have the return of dungeons. To be fair, Divine Beasts were more or less dungeons, just kind of a smaller version of them. But in the interview with the developers, they say the dungeons are huge and each carry their own regional look and feel, just like the traditional Legend of Zelda games. Saying, for example, that there's a dungeon that connects directly from Hyrule's surface, and if you dive from the sky straight into the dungeon, you'll even trigger an event. All I personally hope for is that the dungeons are as innovative as the Divine Beasts were, as I really truly enjoyed the challenge that they gave us. But overall, if you kind of enjoyed the non-linear open world experience of Breath of the Wild, this looks to be very much the same as that. Now we've covered the story and the gameplay mechanics, let's go into a few things you really need to do before you play the game on Friday. First of all, you're going to want to make sure that if you've played Breath of the Wild, you have the save file on the Switch you're currently playing on. Now, I didn't look into it too much because I didn't want to spoil it for myself, but there's definitely going to be something happening in Tears of the Kingdom if you have a Breath of the Wild save file on that Switch. I'd also say if you've played Hyrule Warriors, it might be worth pulling that save file over to your current Switch as well, just in case, because if you've already played them, you don't want to miss out on bonus items. The other thing you want to get ready is your controller. Now, this is just personal preference, but for me, as someone who has no aiming skills whatsoever, being able to aim with my controller made the game so much easier. There were also a number of different puzzles in Breath of the Wild that used motion controls, so one thing to bear in mind is if you're using a third-party controller, especially the wired ones, they probably don't have motion controls built in. So that means either you want to get yourself a proper pro controller, or just make sure your Joy-Cons are charged up and you have the little thing to put them in so you can game that way. Another reason to want the pro controller over a third-party controller is Amiibo. Much like in Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom is gonna have Amiibo support. Now, if you look on the website, they specifically say that if you have one of the official Zelda Amiibo, not just from Tears of the Kingdom, but all of the previous games as well, you'll get helpful materials, weapons, but also paragliders with fabric based on the Amiibo you use. And I am such a fan of all of them. I'm very tempted to go and buy a bunch more Amiibo. But you can also go and have a look at the supported Amiibo, and you can basically find every single Amiibo Nintendo has launched on there. So it looks as though no matter which Amiibo you already have, you can scan them and get something. And if you're anything like me, that means going through all of your cupboards to try and find your Amiibo, as I have no idea where I put them when I moved. The final thing to consider when you're playing Tears of the Kingdom is DLC. Now, we haven't had the confirmation that it's coming, but this is one of the biggest games Nintendo have ever launched, so it's probably coming. The reason I bring it up though is I know a lot of people need to budget given the current times we're living in right now. So just bear in mind the Breath of the Wild DLC came out as just under £20, I think it was. And if it's anything like the Breath of the Wild DLC content, not only will it come out in waves, but it will also be pretty good value for money. I feel like the Breath of the Wild DLC was absolutely incredible and I loved it a lot, and it gave us a lot more cutscenes so I could love the characters even more. So just something to bear in mind. I am so excited for Friday. This is one of the first big launches that I have been a content creator for, and I can't wait to get in on the hype. And by the way, if you're on the fence about buying it or not too sure and you want to see some gameplay, I'll be streaming the game live on YouTube for basically the whole of Friday if you want to come and have a look. And if you're looking for something to play before Tears of the Kingdom, here's a list of my favorite games I'm playing on the Switch right now.